Good morning and happy Sabbath. Deeper yet, that's our plea. If you still have it open in front of you, go to Revelation chapter 3, verse 21, and look at that with me. Revelation chapter 3, verse 21. And the New American Standard says, "He who overcomes, I will grant to him to sit down with me on my throne, as I overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne." So what's the second word, or the third word? He who overcomes. Overcomes means what? You had a problem. If I say I made it up the hill when I'm talking about driving to my house, it means I had to do what? Go up a hill. If we have to overcome, it means we had a problem that we had to get over. So, this is a promise, right? He who overcomes, I will grant to him to sit down with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. So this is not saying life is going to be easy. This is saying you're going to have to work on some things. And this doesn't say people in heaven just got there, smooth sailing, the road wasn't straight, wasn't all calm waters, was it? They had something that they had to overcome. Now, let's turn to the beginning of the New Testament, to Matthew chapter 7. Go with me to Matthew chapter 7 for a moment. Matthew chapter 7, verse 21. What did Jesus say here? "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven will enter." So the people who do the will of the Father will enter heaven. In Matthew chapter 21, verse 7, and then 21 is the verse. "Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name cast out demons? And in your name perform many mighty miracles?'" So would these people look like Christians? These people looked like good Christians. They prophesied, they did good works, they even performed miracles. And then what did Jesus say? "And then I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness.'" So you who aren't keeping my law, go away. You didn't do what you needed to do. So what do you think we could say about the people that Jesus is telling to go away? Did they follow Jesus closely? No. What do you think they did rather than following Jesus closely? They did what felt good. Maybe it wasn't the same as some people who aren't sitting in here might do that feels good. You know, those people may do all manner of things. Lawless according to the Bible. But these people were people who thought that they were doing what was right, and they still found out that they weren't doing everything that God requested. Or, in layman's terms, we could say they were playing church. They went to church, they were very faithful members, they looked like good members, but they were just playing church. One of the first times in my adult life that I really, really saw what playing church looked like, I'm going to tell you a little story. Now, there's a couple caveats to the story. I'll tell you those as we go. But I learned that you have to be so careful what decisions you make now, because it leads to what you're going to become tomorrow. So we were sat there. I don't remember what kind of meeting it was, whether it was a board meeting or something, but one of the members says, "We'd like to have a fall bonfire at our house." And we said, oh, that sounds great. And then somebody said, are we going to be serving meat at this bonfire? Now, especially here in the Northwest, a lot of Adventists are vegetarians. And we have some really good reasons for that. But eating meat is not a sin. There's no 11th commandment that says thou shalt not eat meat. We know that meat was first given to man after the flood. And the earth had been cursed how many times? Once at the fall, once with Cain, and once after the flood, right? So the earth's been now cursed 3 times, and God says, okay, you can eat meat. And then further on in Genesis chapter 11, we notice that Shem lived 600 years. And then we go down a few generations, and Terah, the father of Abraham, lived 205 years. Well, that's only a third. And then we get down to Jacob, and Jacob lived 147 years. And that's still double what we live today. So I think there's very good reasons for the people of God not eating meat. So I'm just pointing that out, that some people choose to do that, and I'm not saying that's a sin. And so when this came up at this church board meeting, I was a little confused. Now, I understand that the person was worried that this might be a church-sanctioned event, and we didn't want to give the wrong impression because we want to choose the Eden diet, as we like to call it, which was fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables. But the attitude that we in this discussion quickly went south. Do you remember, kids, how I said you feel like you put your foot in your mouth? Sometimes we get to see somebody else put their foot in their mouth, and do you ever get that feeling you wish you could melt and just slide off the chair onto the floor and maybe even go through the floorboards and disappear? That's the feeling I got, because this conversation quickly went from, are we going to have meat, to, well, you shouldn't do that. And the part about it that most shocked me was the person who didn't want to have meat at the potluck bonfire, talked about how when she had her boyfriend, who wasn't an Adventist, and brought them to one of these bonfires, they had a discussion. So do you think that's a veggie hot dog? Do you think that's a Loma Linda? No, that one's a real meat one. Are you sure? No, this is a church potluck. We wouldn't have that. So he tasted it. Oh yeah, that was real meat. Okay, well, there's a couple things that I just pointed out. This person had a child with their non-Adventist boyfriend. And we're worried about whether we have meat at a potluck or not. I was a little confused. Now, that was a few years before. But still, the taste that I thought that left in everyone's mouth didn't set real well. So what I started to see was when we play church, we can leave a bad impression, a bad taste in someone's mouth. And I sat down and I said, whatever those people did to get to that point in their life, I don't want to make the same choices. And I need to start looking at my life and figuring out, okay, what choices am I making? Hard choices, or am I making what feels good choices? I need to carefully look at that. It's kind of like, have you been driving, like Bob said in Sabbath school, when they got back to the U.S. from a mission trip where they were in Egypt, he was like, wow, people actually stop at the stoplight. So I've noticed, do you put your turn signal on? Well, I just looked in the rearview mirror, no one's coming. Do I still need to put the turn signal on? Well, if you get in the habit of not putting, Sabine says yes. If you get in the habit of not putting the turn signal on, pretty soon you're just going to be one of those drivers. And you're like, whoa, what were they doing? And I think the same thing happens to us. We need to start looking at what we're doing and noticing that small choices that we make can add up over time. Psalms chapter 139, verse 23 says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Try me, know my thoughts. See, because sometimes we think, we're doing pretty good. And when we think we're doing pretty good, what does God do? If we're willing, he shows us that we're not always doing so pretty good. Just like that missionary. She thought she was doing pretty good, and then she thought, you know what, I'll just translate the last line. That was quite the translation. I wonder what the choir thought. I'm surprised nobody asked any questions before it got to up front. So that has started my thought process of asking God to look at my life and help me see things that I can change. And I wish I could tell you that it happened a lot faster, but it's taken quite a few years to really take root. One of the things I've started to do is when I see that I made a turn in life without using my turn signal, I realized that I formed a bad habit, I've started writing it down. So here's one of my cards. And this was something that I was being grumpy and not asking for things politely. And so on one side of the card, I said, I'll respectfully request what I want and be happy with what I get. And on the other side, it said, what I would never do again. And this, I don't look at this very often. But when I do look at it, it reminds me of a choice that I have to make of how I can behave differently, how my words can sound different to the people in my life. If you can, flip to Psalms 139 in your Bible. Psalms 139. There's a few more things there that we should read. Psalms chapter 139. We're going to start at verse 1. It says, Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I get up. You understand my thought from far away. You scrutinize my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, Lord, you know it all. Even before we speak, God knows what we're going to speak. So what does that give us and God the opportunity to do? It gives us and God the opportunity to catch our tongue before we say something we shouldn't say, right? That's important, because how often do we get in trouble by the things that we say? Probably more so than by, our other body language symbols. So, where do we spend the majority of your time? Do you spend the majority of your time at work? Most people work 40, maybe 50 hours a week. Where do you spend the rest of that time? Because you probably have, 16 hours a day? And so half of it's at work, the other half of it's at home. So more than half of your life you're hanging out with people at home. So who's most likely to hear what you have to say? The people at home, right? So I found this beautiful chapter in the testimonies, and I believe it's called Family Christianity or something along that line. And there was one sentence in there that really piqued my interest. It says, when we begin to work in earnest for ourselves and our families, then we shall have help from God. When we begin to work in earnest for ourselves and our families, we'll have help from God. And that really resonated with me. And then, of course, we know in Isaiah chapter 13, verse 20, the latter part of the verse says, where is the flock that was given you, your beautiful flock? So how are we treating the members of our family? Are we making things smooth and easy, or are we making things difficult? As most of you know, this past fall, my father became ill and passed away in November. And so there's a lot of stress in the family, not just my nuclear family, but with my mom and with my brother. You know, we're all under pressure. This is something new, something sad. And then add to that, winter came. And winter didn't just gradually arrive. It was here with a bang, right? And both my mom and my wife, Marika, don't really like snow, and they don't like driving in snow. And I don't blame them. But, you know, we live here. I have suggested maybe we should transplant and move to the south, but nobody's decided to take me up on that offer yet, and then I'd miss hanging out with all of you folks. But there's certain times driving can be comfortable or uncomfortable, especially right when the snow comes. You know, do we have the snow tires on, and how much snow is it, and should we go? Maybe we should stay home tonight or today from driving. And over the last couple years, I noticed that my wife would always say, "Are you in four-wheel drive?" Well, growing up, my dad was always afraid that if he put the car in four-wheel drive and we drove on any section of dry pavement, it could damage the car. So he was very careful when he put the car in four-wheel drive. And for some reason, he didn't believe we should drive very fast in four-wheel drive. So we tried to put the car in four-wheel drive as little as possible. And so I accepted that. Well, a number of years ago, Marika was saying, you know, maybe we should just buy an all-wheel drive car. So I called up a friend of mine, and he's like, just put the truck in four-wheel drive. It'll be totally fine. I'm like, okay. I'm like, even at 50 miles an hour? Even at 50 miles an hour. Okay. So I'd start putting the truck in four-wheel drive. Mine is a little switch. You turn the switch, turns on the four-wheel drive. So we would slip, and Marika would say, "Are you in four-wheel drive?" And I'd say yes or no. Well, I still kind of enjoy trying to drive in two-wheel drive. Now, if we're on 395 and the car starts to fishtail or something, that scares me. I don't want to go there. So I'm more likely to put it in four-wheel drive there because that makes your heart like skip a beat or two. But if I live 2 miles from that roundabout in Colville, so it's around the roundabout, up the hill, up another hill, up another hill. And of course they're side roads, so they aren't plowed the same. They probably don't have de-icer sprayed, but I'm only going like 25 miles an hour. So to me, slipping there, you know, we're not likely to have a fatal crash. So I'm not too worried about it. And so I kind of like that challenge. Let's see how far can I make it in two-wheel drive? But that was really, really bugging Marika. She did not like having the back of the truck whoosh, going up the hill. And so one day I was with all the stress of my mom's worried about the snow and Marika's worried about whether I'm in four-wheel drive. And I'm like, you know, I really have got to work on the two of them, that it's okay to slip. It's okay to drive in two-wheel drive. And then a light bulb went off in my head. And what do you think that light bulb said? Just put it in four-wheel drive and make her happy. Okay. You know what? That's right. It's just as easy for me to reach over and turn it on to four-wheel drive than it is for me to say, honey, it's okay. We're not going to get in a crash. I'm only going 25 miles an hour. If we slip a little, it's okay. But it's my job as the husband and the leader of the house to help try to make her comfortable. So I reach over and flip it into four-wheel drive if it looks a little bit slippery. At least I'm trying to remember. I'm really trying to remember. And there's a lot of times when I'm going to work or I'm going to run to the store to get a part or something for a project that I can leave it in two-wheel drive and I can slip all I want and it'll be okay. So those are the simple things I'm talking about that we can do in our families to make each other more comfortable. And it doesn't cost me anything. Why would I not reach over and turn it in four-wheel drive and she can be happy and comfortable? A lot of times I'll say, I'm putting it in four-wheel drive. Or if I slip, I can say, no, I'm still in four-wheel drive. I can tell her. It helps. And that kind of goes on to the next little section here, which is, and I know there's different ways to take this saying, but I really like this saying. So I'm going to use it. Happy happy wife, happy life, right? So here's another little quote from that testimonies. It says, the happiness of the family depends much upon the wife and mother. If she is weak and nervous and is suffered to be overtaxed with labor, the mind becomes depressed, for it sympathizes with the weariness of the body. And then she too often meets with cold reserve from the husband. Would cold reserve be like, honey, it's okay, we're not going to die in the little slip? Wouldn't that be kind of cold? If it makes her nervous, just flip it. No, honey, I got it. I'll put it in four-wheel drive. It'll be okay. Cold reserve. So then, let's go to another verse. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 5. And you might be real familiar with this verse, Ephesians chapter 5. And verse 23. This, of course, is the directions Paul is advising for family life. It says, for the husband is head of the wife, as Christ is also head of the church, he himself being the Savior of the body. And so most men would read that and go, yay, I'm the head of the family. That's great. Okay, well, let's read it again. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is head of the church. How is Christ treat the church? This really fully dawned on me in preparing this sermon. Does he listen to us? Does he listen to us no matter what we say or how we feel about the situation? He listens to us. He's sympathetic to us. He knows that we have challenges to overcome. And so this is saying the husband is to treat the wife like Jesus treats the church. The wife may have challenges. Raising kids is not easy. I have 3 of them. And I'm the one that goes to work. She's at home all the time. We're homeschooling our children. That's a lot of work. We have music lessons. My daughter's learning 2 instruments. My son's learning 1, and Harrison has just started on the piano. That's a lot of responsibility. So sometimes she may have feelings about how things are going that she wants me to just listen to and be sympathetic to. Isn't that how Jesus treats us? Sometimes we cry and are sad because our life feels dark, and so we tell Jesus about it, which is what we should do, and he listens very patiently to us. That's the way I need to treat my wife. And if you're married, that's the way you should treat your wife too. And then in verse 28 it says, so husbands also ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself. So we take that as, we have to take care of her. So I was thinking about that as I was preparing, and we could say, well, okay, so do we listen to our own needs? Yeah, if we're hungry, we eat something. If we're tired, we go to bed. And you've all, I'm sure, met those men that clearly do not take care of themselves, clearly do not listen to the needs of their own bodies. So, there's people that in their marriages do not listen to their spouse, do not listen to their needs. But then I thought, doesn't it even go a little further than that? Do we only drink when we're thirsty? Do we only eat when we're hungry? We plan ahead. We're going to want to eat in 45 minutes. So somebody, usually the wife, has thought ahead about what we're going to do for that meal. And so as the husband taking care of the wife, shouldn't we plan for how to care for our wife and how to care for our relationship? Shouldn't we plan, okay, twice a month we're going to go on a date. Once a year we're going to go on a marriage retreat or a special weekend or an anniversary trip. Those are things that we can do to care for our relationship as a husband and wife. Are we really caring for our relationship as we care for ourselves? We plan ahead. Oh, it's going to be cold. We're going to dress up warm. We can plan ahead in our relationship of how to care for each other. Romans chapter 12, verse 10 says, "Be kindly affectioned to one another in brotherly love, in honor preferring one another." Once again, I'm learning more to look for those things to keep our relationship comfortable and happy. And Proverbs 4:23 says, "Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flows the springs of life." Springs, isn't a spring on a hot summer day a refreshing place to visit? Unfortunately, now groundwater seems to be, in some places, like creeks, contaminated, so you can't always drink out of it. But imagine you found this clear, cool spring and you found it. Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. Caring words will be repaid. Words that when we're caring and we're listening, those words, our efforts will be repaid. Proverbs 17:22 says, "A joyful heart is good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones." No one wants to have dry bones. No one wants to have a broken spirit. We want a joyful heart that has good medicine. And then wives have a duty to husbands as well. Here's another little excerpt from that article. It says, "There's often fretfulness and unnecessary complaining on her part. The husband comes home from his labor weary and perplexed, and meets a clouded brow instead of a cheerful, encouraging words. He is but human, and his affections become weaned from his wife. He loses the love of his home, his pathway is darkened, and his courage destroyed." That is a sad picture. But notice that those things happen from small little things that could be changed. So what did she say that the wife may do? The husband comes home weary and perplexed, and he meets a frown or a problem or something not encouraging. So how easy is it to smile, to go to the door and greet your spouse with a hug and a kiss? Cheerful words. The other day, I was working on one of my trucks. I still drive an old pickup. It's out here in the parking lot. I bought it from one of my coworkers when he moved away, and I've kind of enjoyed it. I've replaced a lot of different parts on it. Recently, a part broke, and it was way beyond my capability to fix. I had to take it to a friend, and he had to drill out something on the head of the engine to replace a bolt, a fitting for the cooling system, and got it all fixed. And I drove it home, and we went to go run a short errand, and there's steam billowing out of the truck. And it's like, oh, it's broken again. And so I thought I doctored it up, and so I took it back to the parts store, and I was going to show them the brand new part failed. And I got in there, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that happens all the time. It's a really bad part." And it's not their fault. It's a poorly designed part. And so they said, "Well, here, buy these parts and you can fix it up." And well, in my ignorance, I should have left that vehicle at home because I didn't realize how much of the cooling fluid had been boiled out of it. And so as I'm driving home, the temperature is going like, oh no. So I pulled into a parking lot of the hardware store in Colville and called a friend, and I'm figuring out how I'm going to fix it because I've got some of the parts and I need to, and he's like, "Just fix it in the parking lot." And I'm like, okay. So I'm working on it, and so I had to call Marika and have her bring me some more antifreeze and some more tools. And my friend, the mechanic, was telling me, "You may have cracked the block because you overheated the engine too much." And so I'm feeling really, really dumb. And so I told her, I said, "Honey, your ignorant husband may have really damaged this vehicle." And she had the nicest thing that she said to me. She said, "Well, my smart husband has had a really good job and made us a lot of money because of how smart he is." All right, I think I got the repair. No problem. And praise the Lord, it does not seem to have broken anything with the overheating. But how easy was that for her to speak those encouraging words? I mean, sure, we may have just lost. My truck's not worth very much money, so even if it was broken, it wouldn't have been. The sad part would have been replacing it. That would have been the really sad part. But I was so encouraged by those encouraging words that she spoke to me. And then, of course, so that was the positive side. Now we're going to look at the negative side of what a wife can do. There's some really interesting verses in Proverbs. I'm sure you've heard of them. Proverbs 19:13 says, "A foolish son is a destruction to his father, and the quarrels of a wife are a constant dripping." Nobody likes a constant dripping. And then in 27:15 it says, "A constant dripping on a day of steady rain and a contentious woman are alike." So there's opportunities to live differently. So now I don't want to leave you with those negatives. Let's look at the positives that the Bible has for us. And those positives are in Proverbs 31:10. Everyone knows this. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies, and the heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do to him good and not evil all the days of her life. What a blessing. And then in Proverbs chapter 5, it says, "Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth." And then further on down it says, "Be exhilarated always with her love." The opportunity for us to cultivate love in our families is great. And then one of the quotes, so we've talked about how the husband is the leader and the wife is to submit. And one little phrase out of that article, out of Testimonies, that really caught my eye, that I really liked, it says, "Both should be yielding." Isn't that what we should have? Both the husband and the wife should be yielding. Yes, the scripture gives preference towards the husband as the leader, but we both can have a tender heart and discuss together what the best course of action together is, which leads us to watching together. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6, it says, "Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, so that he may exalt you at the proper time, having cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares about you. Be sober in spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." Satan is out there trying to get us. We have the opportunity to avoid that. And I would encourage you, be intentional. Here's another one of my notes. I just wrote this one down just the other day. Small children really get excited about certain things. And we have a hot tub at our house, and we were enjoying an evening in the hot tub, and the kids said that they were thirsty. So somebody ran out and got some Gatorade that I had purchased for when we were sick or in the summertime. And they're like, "Let's take this to the hot tub." I'm like, okay, that's fine. So, of course, they're saying, "Well, this big, huge bottle is mine, and this one is yours." And I'm like, "No, we're going to get cups." So we got cups and we poured it. But one of the kids was so excited they couldn't stop talking about this. And I was trying to talk about my work schedule or something boring to children. And this one child kept interrupting me, interrupting. Finally, I'm like, "I'm talking, you're interrupting, be quiet." And then I got this. So that night, when I went to bed, I thought, there's got to be a better way. And so I literally got up out of bed, walked out to the living room, and got a sticky note and a pencil, and came back and wrote myself a note. And this is what it says: "Call for a timeout when emotions get high and kids are busy talking." And so the next day, that's what I explained. I said, from now on, if mom or dad says time out, everybody has to stop talking for 30 seconds. I get my watch out, and I time it. And if you talk, the 30 seconds starts over. So we have to have 30 seconds of quiet. After 30 seconds are up, I say, "Okay, Now, what did you need to say? And then I hear from one, and then I go to the other. Now, what did you need to say? Or if it's an interrupting issue, I'm like, okay, Mom and Dad have to finish talking about this. Enjoy the Gatorade that's in your cup until we're done. And then we'll figure out, if we're going to open the next bottle or not. Practical steps to overcome, right? And this has really helped me remember. This is my action plan. Do you have an action plan? Because remember, in Proverbs 18:19, it says, a brother who is offended is harder to be won than a strong city. Doesn't that paint a real picture? And then in verse 21, it says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. What does that mean? Those who love the power that's in the tongue will eat its fruit. Can we say it like that? Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. And do you know what the next verse says? He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. Isn't that amazing? God tells us about how to talk, and then the next thing he does, he brings up our family relation. Isn't that I thought was crazy? There's certain things in the Bible that when you really stop and look at them, they just jump out at you. And then Lisa brought up this morning, I think, you used James 4:7, submit yourselves therefore to God, but resist the devil and he will flee from you. That was perfect, Lisa. It went right along with the sermon. And Psalms 34:17, the righteous cry out, and the Lord hears and rescues them from all their troubles. God cares about us. God wants to help us. He said in Isaiah 61:3, to grant those who mourn in Zion, giving them a garland instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the cloak of praise instead of a disheartened spirit. So they will be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. And then 2 Chronicles 20:15, do not be afraid nor dismayed because of this great multitude, for the battle is not yours, but God's. As we close, I've asked Josiah to play a song for, let's say about 3 minutes, Josiah. In the back of your pew are those little prayer cards. You might be lacking pencils because my kids like to draw pictures on the back of those prayer cards, and the deacons didn't like that, so they took a lot of the pencils out. Bob, maybe you could grab a couple. And if you don't have a pen or a pencil, raise your hand. If you thought of something you can do, write it on that prayer card and stick it in your Bible as a reminder of your action plan, of how you can spend time with God and ask God to touch your heart and find a way that you can communicate with the people in your life, whether it's husband, wife, children, friends, family, close family, a coworker, how you can communicate better with them in a more positive way. Write that down on the card while Josiah plays.